Hello and welcome to episode 24 of Creative Dynamos. Tonight I have with me Joel Balkovec. Joel, how are you doing this evening?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Doing great. Glad to have you on the show. Joel, you are a fantasy author, at least for the moment. You and I connected, I believe, probably on Threads. I put out a call for people to come on the show, answered the call. So tell me a little bit about your writing journey. How long have you been a writer? Got you started?
I guess there the or yeah. Well, I got started like way back as a kid. I've talked about this before in talking with other authors, but somehow my mom got her hands on a British copy of the novelization of the movie Willow. And for some reason that was like really compelling to me as a young child and really influential on me to the point that the first thing I can ever remember sitting down and writing was basically just the exact plot of Willow with all of the names slightly changed.
Nice.
But then
Go
in
ahead.
terms of like actually being a published author, I've been self-publishing a series of fantasy novellas since 2017. Right now, as we're recording this, I'm in the process of rewriting and re-releasing those early books because I've come a long way in developing my tone and like developing the nature of the fictional world. So I've been rewriting those first three stories to better like represent where the series and where the fictional world is now.
That's awesome. Yeah, I noticed you had what you call the classic versions of the first three stories, your fantasy world on your website, be available to read for free.
Yes.
I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, the plan going forward is to start using my Patreon page as like my primary publishing platform. I guess the plan at this point is to actually release audiobook versions of the new forms of those first three stories first, have them available to Patreon subscribers first to hopefully incentivize people to actually sign up to my Patreon page, then release the like book versions, ebook versions of those stories again on the Patreon page, and then start making them available on other platforms. That's still a work in progress. I'm still working on doing the actual rewrites and then working on, like finding people to do the audio versions.
Sure. Was it your love of that Willow, that first sort of interaction with fantasy? Was that the reason why you kind of jumped into fantasy as the first genre that you decided to write in?
I think so. I mean, there's also the fact that I pretty much only read fantasy, so I think it's where I'm most at home. Like, yeah, I'm not really sure how I would approach, even writing something like a hard-boiled detective novel, because, like, how do I write a story where there's no dragons?
Well, the two are not mutually exclusive. I have a detective fiction where dragons certainly play a part. So, yeah, for sure, there's some crossover potential there.
Yeah.
So, tell me a little bit about your world.
So the series is called Realm Guard. That's not actually the world, that's the continent. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, the world of Realm Guard it's not necessarily like a parody of the genre. I'd say it's more like comedic fantasy. It's probably on the whole very similar to Terry Pratchett's Discworld, which is not really deliberate because I started writing a few years before I ever picked up a Discworld novel. But one thing I'm learning about myself is that despite being Canadian, I have a very British sense of humor. So Terry Pratchett and I like sort of end up making a lot of the same jokes and a lot of the same style of jokes. And again, that's not really a deliberate Pratchett influence because a lot of this was becoming apparent even before I ever read Discworld.
Sure. There are worse things than sounding like Terry Pratchett, for sure.
Yeah.
So tell me about the world itself. What is your fantasy world like?
So I sort of established that it's, at the like technological, cultural level of like Europe in the 1620s. Realmguard itself is sort of a combination of North America and Western Europe. One of the main characters, Dunstana, is a little girl pirate, so I think there's a fair pirate influence nautical aspect to the stories because the main characters are from a family of pirates.
Okay. Love that. I love pirate fiction. Does she play a role throughout the series?
Yeah, on the whole, the stories are pretty standalone. It's not like you need to read through all of them in order. I think at most I'll like reference something that happened in an earlier story in the later stories, but it's not like they are direct sequels. Like in one story, Dunstana wins a pirate award for the stuff she did in the previous stories, but again, it's not really direct sequel, all of which is to say I'm sort of like cycling through like the group or the groups of characters who get the attention, which again is sort of like how Discworld works. I think like in the couple dozen Discworld books, there's 4 or 5 main groups of characters. So again, that's not me deliberately emulating Discworld. It's, I guess I had ideas for other groups of characters inside, I'll run with them for a bit before revisiting some of the other characters.
So what's your audience for these books, age-wise, would you say?
I sort of take the approach of, they're sort of like Disney movies and that like they're ostensibly like 4Ks, but I think everyone can enjoy them. I think the real answer is my audience is people with younger siblings.
Okay. Why that connection to younger sibling?
I think so. I wrote the first version of the first Realmguard story, I think when I was 17 or 18, and I'm 11 years older than my little brother. So I think I had some things to work through about being an older sibling.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I am the kind of author that tends to write multiple genres. While I have a couple of what I would call series, they don't have a lot of books in them yet. What's it like for you to write a series? Do you have them sort of planned out in advance? Are you a more answer when it comes to the planning aspect of the series itself? What's your approach to the series?
So I think my approach is to, take it a bit like the way they write The Simpsons, for example, and that, there's, the one world, there's the same group of characters, but there isn't much connection between the, individual stories. That I find that my stories are very episodic and are fairly standalone.
Okay. All right. What about the individual books themselves? Are you a plotter on that?
Probably not. I think each one sort of starts with a specific premise. So, this will be the one where Dunstano wins the Pirate Award. Let's see how I can turn that into a full story. Oh, they're on vacation to go to the Pirate Awards. Oh, but it's going to be like the worst vacation ever for Dunstano's sister, Kat, because she's going to get jumped by some bandits, and then we'll go from there.
So you start out with this central premise and just see where it...
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. So you said that you didn't really read much Terry Pratchett, but you feel like there are some similarities there. Who might some of your inspiration been for your writing in general?
Yeah, that's actually something I need to think about, because Realm Guard's not really that similar to like the authors I would consider my main influences. That's probably like Tolkien, Robert E. Howard, the creator of Conan. I think for the most part, for Realm Guard, my main influence is probably actually like real world history, because a lot of the pirates, for example, are like loosely based or like comedic takes on real pirates. So Calico Jack, for example, was a real pirate. Calico was the I think it's the fabric his clothing was made of, or it's like the pattern on the clothing. Anyway, it has something to do with his clothes. So I decided to take that, run with it. And one of the major pirates in Realm Guard is Plaidjack.
Nice.
Yeah, so I think at least for Realm Guard, it's probably like my own my own knowledge of fairly obscure real world trivia that I'm taking and running with, because I didn't actually read that much like kids books or YA fiction when I was actually that age. I did sort of jump straight to I guess more grown up, mature reader stuff. Or in elementary school, my mom was reading me stuff like Lord of the Rings.
I noticed when I was looking at your website that you have a lot of projects. You do some writer services, or some culture sites. It looks like you've done a lot of stuff outside of writing. What's your favorite project to work on? You're not doing your fiction.
So yeah, the writing services. I started my own professional writing and editing business last fall, so I've been trying to develop that in the year and a bit since. I think mostly as a way of promoting myself in a way of that is an income stream in itself. I've started posting videos on Instagram, on YouTube, on TikTok. Again, that sort of goes back to the, knowledge of obscure trivia factoids. So a lot of what I'm posting is, 30-second fact videos. Right now, one of the big things I'm working on, it's like a seminar for writing characters, specifically taking the approach of writing better characters for Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay. What are some approaches that you would suggest towards writing a character?
So the way I frame, or the way I actually do the seminar, at least in person, is I've got a big box of the actual Dungeons and Dragons or Warhammer miniatures, and tell people reach into the box, take somebody out of the box. That's going to be you. You've just walked into a tavern. What's your drink? And then sort of walk through the various rules, for lack of a better word, of character writing. So my starting point is actually two of the, I think, 8 rules for writing short fiction that Kurt Vonnegut came up with. One of them is that every story needs to give the reader somebody to root for, and every character should want something, even if it's just a glass of water. So I'm, sort of starting there, because there's the idea of like, one, in real life, like, be a person people want to play Dungeons and Dragons with. So like, don't create a character who exists solely to deliberately provoke the other characters. And then in terms of like the actual in-game stuff, like, again, be a character that the other characters are going to want to help succeed. And then, from there, sort of like, okay, we're going to walk through your character's backstory, like, where are they from? What was the defining moment in their life up to this point?
Okay. Those are some pretty good ground rules. So do you play Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah.
Do you tend to run games, or do you tend to play games, or a mixture?
A little of both. Right now, I'm trying to DM a game for some of my friends, but as I think anyone who has tried to run a game of Dungeons and Dragons will know, trying to get together a group of 4 working adults is a bit like herding cats.
Just a little. This is starting to become a running gag on the show. I need to develop a bingo card, and one of the spots on the bingo card is going to be guest played, and they're like, as that's becoming a running. But I think that's a great way to learn about storytelling, to learn about character building, because to your point, answering questions about characters' background or in their motivation. These are the kinds of know about characters that we create for our stories. Yeah, I think that in a way, if you haven't played a role-playing game as an author, then maybe you should give it a shot, because it's a great way to learn some of those skills. For sure.
Yeah, and that's, I think, one of the approaches I'm taking to try to like actually pitch this to people, to like get them to, like set up a run through for them. Because even though this is like in the specific context of like playing Dungeons and Dragons, like, one, I think the approach is broad enough that like it would work for any role-playing game, but I think fundamentally this is all like writing advice. I'm not trying to sound too self-aggrandizing here, but I think it is good writing advice. So I think, like, if you don't have an interest in Dungeons and Dragons, I think going through the process of like, okay, this elf is you, now tell me about them, is going to be helpful to anyone. I think what I really need to figure out how to do is a way to like spin this as a like business or corporate thing. And because like, as much as I hate the like business corporate world and the whole like corpo speak approach to doing everything, I think there is a way I can get like businesses to like pay me to do this as a team building exercise. Because I think, again, I haven't quite cracked it, but I think like, okay, this elf is this elf is going on an adventure. Tell me about them. Can somehow be transferable to like, okay, now tell me about your business's adventure. Oh man, I hate myself for that.
No, I mean, there are certainly, I think, ways that, because writing is communication.
Yeah.
And if you go in with the attitude that you're teaching people how to communicate better, then that's a valid approach. Storytelling certainly be leveraged in a number of different ways to turn people into better communicators. So there's definitely something there. I think you just have to look at it from the right angle. So I noticed on your website that you are working on a science fiction project.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if the posts are currently actually up on the Realm Guard website. I've been reorganizing a bunch of stuff and like taking things down and putting them back up and stuff like that. All of which is to say the idea for this the full-length sci-fi novellas I'm working on right now began life as a couple of short 500-word scenes I did at one of the various points in the past few years. I've tried to like write 500 words a day every day for a month. And, at one point I had the idea of like, what if I try to transfer Realm Guard into a sci-fi setting? My idea for that was like the relationship between the fantasy Warhammer game and Warhammer 40K, the sci-fi game. It's not quite like one-to-one Warhammer in space, but it's very clearly influenced both mechanically and conceptually by a lot of the groundwork that fantasy Warhammer laid. So, yeah, sort of taking that approach with Realm Guard and like, okay, what if Cat and Dunstan are pirates? What if they're space careers? And then the more of those short scenes I wrote, the more I liked the idea. I'm currently involved with a writing community called Legend Fiction. And because November is usually the like write a novel in a month, they were doing like a daily thing, or like daily writing thing with like check-ins and like a whole community thing during November. So that's where I finally decided, okay, this is my chance to actually write the first Space Realm Guard. I don't really have a proper title for the setting yet, but yeah, finally do Realm Guard in space for real. Unfortunately, I had a really bad cold for about half of November, so I wasn't quite as productive as I wanted to be, though I did at least get the first draft of the story done.
So what were some of the challenges as somebody who's kind of a big fantasy fan? What were some of the challenges of working in a science fiction world, even if it was sort of, as you said, an updated fantasy kind of situation?
I think one of the big things is like, okay, like how does the technology work? Like how does space travel work? What's a way I can make it different from all of the sci-fi stuff that actually or that already exists? Yeah, I think the other thing, I think specifically in trying to like transfer a world that basically already exists into a different setting is like, okay, how do I make it clear that like this is coming out of the Realm Guard world while also keeping it different enough that it's not just like a slightly different coat of paint, that it is its own thing despite having a lot of Realm Guard's DNA in it.
I mean, there's definitely precedent. I mean, you mentioned Warhammer 40K, but then there's, I don't read, shoot. His names are on the tip of my, there's a book called there's a book series. I'm just going to look it up. I have to forget. They're in, so Mistborn, Brandon Sanders wrote a future version, I guess, for lack of a better term, his Mistborn series, and I hadn't read any of the Mistborn series, but somehow I picked up Alloway of Law, probably because on the cover it looked like a Western. I love Westerns. So, I mean, there's certainly a lot of precedent for taking a traditional fantasy story and advancing it, several, 1,000 years, 2,000 years. And I had a friend, I have a friend who has a series that is sort of takes place in this place called Metamor City. It's basically his D came from when he was in college. I'm sorry, when she was in college, and she advanced it thousands of years into the future to the point where there's like all this. It's almost level of technology, but there's still magic. There's still all these fantasy races. It's interesting to see the connection of magic, fantasy with high tech kind of science fiction. So sci-fantasy is definitely, I think it should be not easy, but certainly very possible to pull off what you're trying. Keep the DNA of Realm Guard, but add technology. Sounds like that would be an interesting concept.
Thanks.
Yeah. So, any idea when you might be coming out with that?
Hopefully at some point in 2026. Again, I think I need to work out a bit more of my production, publishing calendar, especially for the audiobook versions, that's what I want to release first. Yeah, I think I'm probably at least most of the way through a second draft. So I think it would be ready for publication in another couple months, but I just need to figure out okay, how am I going to handle this? Where is it going to fit in the stuff I already have coming down the pipeline? Yeah, so hopefully 2026, but I think I'll have a better sense once everything else starts falling into place.
That makes sense. Definitely important to have a plan. And so, do you envision staying in Realm Guard for the foreseeable future in various iterations, or at some point branching out into creating something completely unrelated?
Right now, there are a couple of, I mentioned Robert E. Howard and Conan being big influences on me. So I have written a couple of things that are very much more Conan influenced, Conan style sword and sorcery stories that I've been trying to shop around without much success. One of the things I wanted to do for a while was, a really unapologetically Dungeons and Dragons style high fantasy story, not aimed at a kid, all ages audience. Throughout kids, and I don't think any of the stuff that I write would be considered adult with finger quotes. But I do want to write more stuff that isn't directly aimed at kids, so I can be a bit more free with the violence and the fight scenes and the thematic stuff going on. So this was sort of my opportunity to do that. Again, it sort of started out as one of the month-long, 500 words a day things that I do. I think part of the reason I had trouble doing the daily writing thing with legend fiction in November is because I was writing this story every day in October, so I got burned out pretty quickly continuing to do that for another month. But yeah, all of this is to say I did write like that Dungeons and Dragons style adventure. It's up on my Patreon page. It's a bit of a mess, but that was mostly because the main goal of the exercise was like write enough words a day rather than like write a coherent story. I think there's at least like the bones of a good story there, but if I am ever gonna like actually publish it, I definitely need to like go through and smooth things
Oh, sure.
out.
I think it's important to have goals, like have goals and have discipline, and whether that looks like writing X number of words a day or writing for X period of time a day, or setting a longer goal to write a certain number of words over the course of a month. But to understand that at the end of that period of time, you're still gonna have to sit down with the red pen and do some cutting, smoothing. That's kind of where I'm at now. I'm in the process of editing a novel that I've been through a couple of times now, and up to what hopefully is my final editing pass to get it ready for publication. Yeah, but and it started as one of those. I want to write X hundred number of words, a day, and I basically wrote the first probably third of this in chunks. And then I had to write the connective tissue. And that was a way to get a start on this, because I hadn't written anything quite like that before in that way. So that was a lot of.
Yeah. I think one of the things I did notice during the legend fiction thing in November is that, like, as much as I got burnt out by trying to, like, write every day for 2 months and was sick for about half the month and couldn't get a lot done, like, when you sit down and write 1,000 words a day, 1,000 words is a lot. Like, the story progresses really quickly if you can keep hitting that threshold. I mean, like, even 500 words a day. Like, in October, I basically wrote a novella length story in a month.
It's amazing what you can accomplish by just doing a little bit at a time like that. It doesn't feel like much. And if you can just get started in a particular writing session, if you can just get a few hundred words down. It is to say you have to stop at 500, but if you can get that 500 down, then great. A little bit more, great. So I think that I think what you have to do though is, like, obviously if you get sick or something comes up, you just have to give yourself some grace and say, it's tomorrow, the groove. But you have to look back and say, hey, I accomplished writing 15,000 words or 30,000 words over the course of 2 months. I mean, that's significant.
Yeah, and going back to Terry Pratchett again, I remember seeing like a Facebook post where somebody was talking about how, like, Terry Pratchett's daily writing routine was to write just 500 words a day, and like that clearly works because he wrote something like 41 Discworld books and became one of the most popular fantasy authors of all time.
Yeah, it's about consistency in that case. If you can consistently do a little bit every day, then you can get a lot done over the course of a year. That's 500 words a day over the course of the year is 180,000 words roughly, and that's at least 2 novels, 1 novel if you're Stephen King. So yeah. Well, Joel, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Share with our audience where we can find you.
Got a couple of different websites based on what exactly I'm trying to do with them. Realmguard.com is where I publish the Realmguard stuff, like Scott mentioned at the top of the show. The original versions of the first 3 stories are up there for free, and they are probably going to be up there for as long as the Realm Guard website exists. The website for my Reddit editing business, which also came up in passing, is emonoliterary.com, EMONA literary. Emono Literary is also my main social media hashtag on basically everything. I'm on Threads, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Substack, and again, Emono Literary is my handle on basically everything.
Awesome. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll chat soon.
Yeah, thanks.